You're not going to flake out on us too, are you, sis?
We've all got those things our friends are into and we just don't have any interest in, but end up pleasantly surprised when we actually give them a go. And for me, it was this game, Onechanbara Z2 Chaos, an action game for the PS4 and PC by Tamsoft and published by NIS America. And if you haven't noticed from the footage, this is a game in the same vein as the likes of Senran Kagura and Valkyrie Drive, an over-the-top hack and slasher that relies mainly on scantily clad anime girls and their boobs to sell copies. Now, don't be fooled, while this game does have a trashy aesthetic and Z-grade story, they actually conceal a surprisingly deep combat system and decent challenge that will have you genuinely engaged. But it's an engagement that's understandably fleeting considering that this is the latest entry in a series of budget titles. The story is absolutely bare bones and has no bearing on the gameplay outside of gradually introducing new enemy types, and it also doesn't help that it's a direct continuation of the last couple games on last-gen platforms. So really, only fans are going to get what's going on in the grand scheme of things, but at least the characters are enjoyable, albeit one-note anime caricatures, and considering the style of everything, narrative really isn't the focus. It's really just here to justify why we're hacking up zombies across the world as, well, hot anime girls in bikinis. And with that being said, the combat is a lot of fun, and it's a lot deeper than initial first impressions would have you believe. It's your basic light attack, heavy attack system where you chain combos together, but what makes this stand out from the likes of Devil May Cry and Bayonetta is that rather than swapping out weapons, you're actually swapping out any of the four heroines, each with their own weapons, stats, and combat style preferences, giving you a great versatility when you throw yourself into the zombie hordes. It even plays into a subtle layer of customizable strategy where you choose the cycling order before a level starts. And to top all this off, the presentation is suitably over the top and crass thanks to its liberal use of close-ups and slow-mo, particularly on the girls' bodies when they start doing certain actions with the zombies, and not in a lewd way. All this can become very addicting, like in the Muso games when you're trying to get your kill and your hit counts as high as you can without breaking the chain, but it's an addictive streak that can get dull eventually. One reason for this is because your weapons get progressively weaker the dirtier they get, so it's quite common to end up in situations where you haven't got a choice, you have to stop and flick the blood off your weapons because your other weapons aren't an option anymore, and neither are the other characters' weapons. While this does encourage further strategic thinking in the heat of the moment, it does also aggressively wreck the flow, especially when you're trying to land a 1000-hit combo. It also doesn't help that the environments in the game, they're just empty. The more open areas are just flat out barren, and the more smaller areas are just painfully cramped, making the levels feel reminiscent of the worst parts of Devil May Cry 2. Since in between fights you're just running through these big empty areas with nothing to do, and that's only when you're not in a level where there are needless doors that take you to other locations that don't serve a purpose other than to just pad out the level. Thankfully, its over-the-top spectacle can draw you back in until you realise it pales in comparison to what other games can offer. In Bayonetta, for instance, you're almost always thrown to a diverse variety of different set pieces and occasional changes to the core gameplay, which stops it from getting stale and keeps you invested every step of the way. Here, the combat is all it has. There's no real shakeups to the core gameplay or anything distinct or unique to the levels outside of, well, their colour palettes and some specific enemies for each one. Which reminds me, all the enemies borrow from the same colour palette as Gears of War. So when they're all grouped together, they just become this indistinguishable black and grey mess, thanks to how heavily they contrast with the bright aesthetics of the levels, screwing up your strategy and forcing you to rely on button mashing because you can't tell one tank enemy from basic cannon fodder, at least until you thin out their numbers. However, in spite of all that, at least the game does offer good value for content. Outside the story mode, there's a solid skirmish mode, complete with leaderboards, and these missions can be more fun thanks to them lacking the running around in between the battles. And they also change up the experience by adding different victory conditions, like only certain attacks can deal damage or your weapons have to have a certain amount of filth in order to actually damage enemies. Not to mention, these skirmishes offer the player a chance to grind and advance more easily through the story mode as you practice each character's combos. And then there's the shockingly deep feature Onechanbara shares with Senran Kagura, the dress-up mode. The customization options here are just utterly ridiculous, and allow for a good deal of customization on par with Saints Row 2. And honestly, it can be a lot of fun just dressing up the girls in any variety of skimpy outfits with fetish accessories. The only real downside to this mode though is that the majority of the options are either unlocked or you gotta buy them as DLC, and outside the aesthetics, it doesn't actually serve a practical purpose, but this is still a nice distraction from the core experience. If I had to call Onechanbara one thing, it'd be this. It's a popcorn game. Something you play when you're bored and you just want to kill time until you feel bored again and do something else. While it can't compare in every way to the likes of Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, it's still a solid low-budget alternative that has the most to offer for long-time fans of the series and similar titles. So in that regard, I can actually say it's worth a go if you're curious. Well, this was certainly a fun game, wasn't it? Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed putting it together. If you really did like the video, then don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. And for game reviews next month, I'm going to take a look at Bethesda's all-new horror game, The Evil Within 2. Can't wait for that. Anyway, I'm going to have my review of the new It out as soon as I can. But for now, feel free to watch some of my other videos. And as always, stick around.